need someone to show me my place in all this.
Welcome back to Kris Vents. I'm your host, back with Dom, the Disembodied Discord voice, and today we're trying something a little different. Number one, no notes today. We're purely going off of memory because this movie is fresh in both of our minds. Well, fresh-ish in his case. This is a movie I have not gotten around to seeing for the past 3.5 years, and I honestly don't know why. I just never got around to it, which is funny because it's part of one of my favorite film franchises of all time, The Last Jedi. And to tell you the truth, Dom, I have no idea why it's taken me this long to get around to seeing it.
I think I do know. Simple lack of enthusiasm. It's why I didn't see The Last Jedi until last year myself. There's a curiosity, but the curiosity was dimmed by...
very questionable narrative choices.
It was dimmed by demoralization, anti-Disney sentiment, the fact that this new canon had replaced one of the most richly endowed, expanded universes in all of narrative history, and the fact that Force Awakens was not a bad film in a technical sense.
It was just a $250 million fan film, which is about the best kind of movie you can get when your director is Jar Jar Abrams.
I actually did plan to see Last Jedi in theaters at the time, but I just couldn't. I didn't have the ability, and it slipped. And I just from osmosis, I got several. I learned all the spoilers to the film and several plot details. And so that kind of ruined it for me, and I went in kind of knowing what was going to happen. And I became aware that the film was very controversial, and more so than Force Awakens. Apparently, they really... Rian Johnson went in the exact opposite track. Instead of a rehash of A New Hope, he tries to deconstruct everything. And it's not that, in my opinion, these are bad ideas, or even in some of these cases that the execution is bad. It's just that he tries to do it all at once.
That was my biggest issue with this movie. Was there were a lot of really good ideas. Rian Johnson had some solid ideas. The problem is that he just did not. It felt like in the first stage, the first draft of your script, as I was telling you earlier, the first draft is where you just dump everything out. You just dump all your ideas out. And then in the second draft, you have to go through and be like, okay, this is a mess. I need to polish this. And then you do a third draft, fourth draft, however many drafts you need until you're finally satisfied. This movie felt like Rian Johnson went with his first draft. And the fact that Kathleen Kennedy pretty much just told him to make the kind of movie he wanted does not help that situation. It only exacerbates it.
I will confess to being less knowledgeable about the personalities behind this than you are, and that I didn't have as much knowledge with J.J. Abrams' work and none at all with Rian Johnson.
This is the fourth Rian Johnson movie I've seen so far. I will say this much. He is not a bad director. His problem is his hubris. He has a certain arrogance that I think overshadows his abilities as a director. He is a good writer. He is a good director. It's just that The Last Jedi is not a good movie. It's a bad Star Wars movie. It's a bad Rian Johnson movie. And it's a bad movie in general. It's a very pretty movie. I'm pretty much in the George Lucas camp of it. It's a pretty movie, but it's not a good movie.
Yes, and as a result of the flaws mentioned earlier, namely that they didn't try to prune anything, they didn't try to make it leaner. This is the longest Star Wars movie at over 2.5 hours. and I told you that you'd start feeling the drag. Did you?
I kind of did. Like around, you said it would be about 40 to 50, within the last 40 to 50 minutes of the movie, I would feel it. And I kind of did. But for the most part, the movie did move at a fairly brisk pace for me.
It
Uh,
had to. There's so much to cover that even with two
yeah,
hours
there
and
are,
32 minutes, they had to move.
that's perhaps the movie's biggest issue is that there is too much going on in this movie. There are too many characters to focus on, and it's like say what you want about the original trilogy and even the prequel trilogy, but they gave us a certain number of they limited the amount of characters we had to focus on. Even George Lucas knew that too many people to follow is a detriment to the story.
As you recall, in A New Hope, there's basically one line. Uh, After the battle over Tatooine, you follow Luke and Obi-Wan as they collect Han, get on board, get sucked into the Death Star. Everything leads up to the Battle of Yavin. And then in Empire, things split up, and there's two storylines that eventually converge again. And in Return of the Jedi, there's three plot lines. And I think that's the maximum you can go, assuming you do it well, which
Yeah,
last I didn't. But assuming you can do it well, three is the magic number. Let's see. There's the Ho versus Holdo subplot. There's Rey training with Luke. There's Kylo Ren struggling with other members of the First Order. And then there's Finn and Rose and the others trying to pull off their own plan. Am I missing something?
not really. It's there's four separate narratives to this, all trying to converge on this one movie, and it feels like even though there's one writer attached to this movie, Ryan Johnson, it feels like one of those movies where there's too many cooks in the kitchen. It feels like there's again like a first draft where somebody just dumped all the shit in their mind out onto the page, and now it's like you really needed a script doctor to iron it out. Like there were at least three characters in this movie that did not need to be there. You could have removed Holdo from the entire plot line and just replaced her with Leia and not have her be laid up in a in an infirmary bed from her fucking force space survival bullshit. You could have removed Rose from the entire plot line and just had Finn going off on his own. You could have just removed the entire plot line with the casino, and
Yeah,
we wouldn't have had to bother with Benicio del Toro's Latino Calrissian.
you finally got to see Cano Bite or Blight, whatever.
Whatever. I will say I kept hearing Casino Planet, and when they got there, I was like, it's just a casino in a little crevice. It's like, what the fuck is I was like I was telling you earlier. I was picturing like with how Coruscant is basically this one city the size of a planet.
You wanted
I was picturing it to be like that, like a casino
oh,
that is an
like
entire planet-wide casino,
that
like
would have been
the space station from Cowboy Bebop.
or the level from Sonic, Casino Zone, but
Yeah,
in Star Wars.
I was expecting something like that, but no. It was just one little casino, which led to an entire subplot that could have easily, if you had carved it off, if you had cleaved it off in the film, it could have removed 30 minutes from the runtime.
At least. But that's the thing. They put that in there not because it progressed the plot, but because it gave more opportunities to subvert expectations.
Yeah.
Now that you heard that phrase.
Yeah, I overused to describe this movie. And this movie does subvert expectations, but not in a good way. Like, you come into Star Wars expecting a tightly woven narrative. You expect some level of character development. You expect a soap opera that takes place in outer space. You expect The only thing it does deliver on is the visuals and the some of the action sequences were very nice. You expect some level of philosophy. You expect high sci-fi and fantasy melding together, and this movie is just a mishmash.
The only other Star Wars work I can think of that went about trying to deconstruct or question the roots of Star Wars was Knights of the Old Republic 2. But that's not the focus of this review, so I'll just say that that was a lot better received. Let's not just focus on subversion of expectations. There are other themes that they try to put in there to get people get the old noggin jogging. You mentioned to me about how communication was important, and spoiler alert,
Yeah,
one major conflict, namely the mutiny aboard the whatever it's called, Raditz. Uh, if Admiral Holdo just told Poe and the others the plan, that would have avoided the whole mutiny and a whole bunch of other stuff. They wouldn't have had to go on their mission. That would have avoided a bunch of headaches. But then other people pointed out that the reason their mission backfired was because they brought this untrustworthy guy, Del Toro, along with them, and he squealed. So that actually emphasizes the need to keep things super secret, like Holdo was presumably trying to do. Uh, so it's a case where both sides have a point, I think was what they were going for. You can see why Holdo made the decisions she made. You can see why Poe made the decisions he made.
no, it doesn't come off that way. Like when Leia says, "Yeah, we knew there were spies on the ship," kind of thing. Yeah, it sort of makes sense, but the way Holdo treats Poe, it doesn't come off like that. It comes off as she's just blowing him off because he has a dick.
Yeah, she could have at least intimated that there was some sort of plan, and also not being worried that there are spies. Fine, but there's never any indication she's making an effort to root out the spies or do anything, so that when they finally put her plan into action, they're not just going to be told on anyway. This is what I mentioned to you. They were trying to be clever with her. And what I mean is they were trying to get you to hate her. Like I don't think you were really meant to root for her. Uh you were meant to take Poe's side, but then oh, I was wrong about her. She was right all along. Uh that's
Well,
what they were going for. Like
yeah, like that's what they were going for, but that's not quite how it came off as. It it
yeah.
it, it just felt like Ryan Johnson trying too hard to be clever. And it's painful for me because number one, Laura Dern, who played Holdo, I actually like. She's in my favorite movie of all time, Jurassic Park, and she was great in Jurassic Park. It's also painful for me because to watch this entire movie, which is just a mess. Because Ryan Johnson, as I said, is a solid director. Brick was a really good take on the hard-boiled detective story. Looper was a crazy mix of crime drama and sci-fi thriller. And then you had Knives Out, which was a really good whodunit. The only movie he's done that I haven't seen is The Brothers Bloom, which I'll probably get around to eventually. But those were three really, really solid movies. And then you get to The Last Jedi, and it's like, dude, I know Knives Out came out after The Last Jedi, but still, it's like, dude, you shit the bed hard, and your smug hubris, in response to the fans, to the rightful chorus of detractors against this movie, did not help matters any.
Maybe this was an overreaction to criticism of The Force Awakens. You know, it's too by the book, too formulaic, too much, too like A New Hope. So they try to do something that's like a parody of Empire Strikes Back. One of the controversies was how Luke was treated, and something Mark Hamill complained about was Luke's a jackass, and this isn't how Luke would behave, and uh, that was actually interesting. I don't know if I endorse it, but it was interesting him sort of acknowledging the fan conclusion that the Jedi kind of sucked or weren't that great, and making it a plot point.
Yeah. I mean, the Jedi pretty much did blind themselves to the Sith rising back up. It's kind of partially their fault Palpatine came into power and was able to take over the galaxy.
Right. So Luke he tries to revive the Jedi. It backfires horribly again. He concludes there shouldn't be any more Jedi. He comes around, but the film ends with him changing his mind on that. So, how much of a perversion of it really was Luke? What really was it of Luke's character?
Yeah, I'm trying to, like, on the one hand, I kind of get why Luke would close himself off to the Force after what happened between him and Ben Solo, but at the same time, like to a certain degree, like you're living on an island in the middle of bumfuck nowhere, like as far like even farther on the outer rim than even Tatooine. Like I'm sure the fact that somebody was able to find you should give you some semblance of hope that you can there will actually we can actually restore some kind of balance to the Force, to the galaxy. The way he was written it wasn't quite like it was like Ryan Johnson wanted him to be like Obi-Wan was in the original movie, but he didn't want to just. It was another case of him not wanting to repeat the past, so we're not going to quite turn Mark Hamill into Alec Guinness. So we're just going to turn him into that grumpy guy that kind of sits under the overpass.
Leia is that we don't ever see Luke's reaction to Han's death. Leia's out of action for the bulk of the film.
They actually did film a scene of Luke grieving over Han's death, but they cut it out of the movie. Which Mark Hamill made a comment about. He was like, "Yeah, they don't have time to show me grieving over the loss of a friend, but they have time to show me milking those sea beasts."
Yeah, you think 2 hours and 32 minutes. They didn't really feel themselves pressed for time, but apparently they did. What else? Rose Tico, the Jar Jar Binks of the sequel trilogy. People say.
You know what? Jar Jar Binks was a more likable character.
He was useful in his own way
because he didn't insist on being a part of the story. He was just kind of along for the ride. Rose is a character who was only in the story because her sister died in the opening sequence, and she insists on making herself a part of this plot. You could replace her with a lamp.
I didn't really notice her when I watched the film. Like I wasn't seething with anger whenever I saw her.
Yeah,
you're right.
She's just kind of there. Like Jar Jar Binks, he was goofing off in the background, and you couldn't help but notice it because he's so goofy. But Rose was like, she was just, oh, you're still here? Okay, I guess. Another thing that could have easily just been written out of the movie, or just another detail that could have been ironed out in rewrites.
Speaking of things that could have been ironed out or rewritten, Snoke didn't have to be in the trilogy at all.
No.
What was his point? It could have just been Kylo Ren falling the dark side on his own.
Yeah.
And leading the First Order, and there's no Snoke at all.
Yeah, like when Kylo Ren kills him, it's like no fucks to be given. It was like if the Razor Fist had a perfect analogy. It was like if an Empire Strikes Back, Vader had killed Palpatine in the second act, but before you could see Palpatine as a credible threat, then you wouldn't have had Return of the Jedi, where, oh my god, you see the full power of the Emperor.
They treat, first of all, the name Snoke annoys me. Second of all, he's treated as a joke. No rhyme intended. Like you see after he gets bisected, you sort of see his corpse or something.
Is that in Rise of Skywalker? Because I haven't seen that yet.
No, no, no. I'm talking about Last Jedi. Like sometime after his death scene, there's a shot where you see his body that's just cut in half.
Oh,
Uh,
right.
I guess maybe it's a blink and you miss it scene,
I
but
guess so because I think Hux, the character of Hux, was in frame, and I was too busy focusing on him. I was like, well, I've already seen Snow cut in half. I don't need to look at him again.
he wasn't. There are all sorts of theories on who Snoke was. It was just one of those. It was part of the subverting of expectations. Like everyone has their own theory of who Snoke is. Maybe he's Darth Plagueis. That was the most popular one, I think.
Really?
But yeah, you didn't hear about that?
No, I didn't. I have a tendency to veer away from fan theories and fan forums because most of them are just kind of bullshit.
Yeah, well, that was like the most popular theory that Snoke was Darth Plagueis, Palpatine's Sith Master, because what Palpatine said he could stop people from dying. Maybe he could prevent himself from dying, and he actually survived Palpatine's murder attempt without his knowledge. Uh that
That would
was
have
the,
that would have made sense.
it would have maybe, but that obviously wasn't the case, and I think Ryan Johnson actually had a she actually had a comment on that. In addition to explicitly denying that he was Darth Plagueis, he said it would have stopped. He said flat out he wasn't going to elaborate on Snoke's backstory. He said it would have stopped any of these scenes dead cold if he had stopped and given a 30-second speech about how he's Darth Plagueis. It doesn't matter to Ray. If he had done that, Ray would have blinked and said, "Who?" and the scene would have gone on. And I'm not saying he's Darth Plagueis. Uh,
On the one hand, that makes sense, but on the other, you stopped a movie dead in its tracks for 30 minutes to have Finn and Rose fiddle fuck about in a casino for a plot point that went absolutely nowhere.
I don't think J.J. Abrams wanted Snoke killed off like that. I think he wanted a safer uh, progression of plot. Was Ryan Johnson? Oh, the Palpatine, the ersatz Palpatine. He gets killed halfway through the second movie. You didn't see that coming. That's what he was trying to do. Oh, the smuggler guy who's sort of like Han Solo betrays them in the end. Oh, the bitch admiral turns out to be good and caring all along. Where the hell else?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Oh, Luke came down to the salt mine to help fight the First Order. Psych! It's actually an astral projection.
Oh, and now he's gonna die.
Yeah. Now he's become one with the Force. It's like
You
it was Ryan Johnson for 2.5 hours nudging you in the ribs and going, "You see how fucking clever I am." It was a $300 million fan film where the director was too busy stroking himself off to process that his story was kind of that just how shit his story was. Like fucking, you think Finn is gonna have that big heroic moment where he charges the battering ram like the dude in Independence Day? Is like, nope, Rose is gonna save him, and then drops one of the dumbest philosophy for dummies lines ever uttered by a human being that was ever written by a human being. Like
I
shit that makes Hideo Kojima look like Shakespeare.
we're gonna not by fighting what we hate, but killing or saving what we love as the resistance base goes up in flames in the background. I guess you don't love the resistance.
No, I as that door gets blown to hell, and your friends are about to die, but fuck them, I guess. Reason number 9, Septillion, why Rose just should have been removed from the script entirely.
Yeah, it could have just been they didn't have to have Finn try to do that. So it's not like she needed to save him. He could have just concluded, "Oh, that's probably not going to work anyway."
No,
And
we don't have time to at least give Finn a naturally organic narrative on his own. No, we need to watch Chewie fiddle fuck about with product placement. that is
Yeah,
trying
those.
too hard to be the cutest thing on the planet, but it's like, fuck you, I'll stick with the Ewoks.
Yeah, the Ewoks were helpful.
Yes.
Uh, they probably just got backlash because they looked too cutesy, so they didn't look like a credible threat. But I think that's it. Otherwise, oh, what else is there I feel like I feel like there's still 1,000 things I could bring up. The aftermath of the Battle of Crate, everybody's jammed into one ship, the Millennium Falcon. So the Resistance is basically completely wiped out. But they try to end on a cheery note anyway, which
Yeah.
Empire didn't do. Empire ends on a, I don't think it's depressing, but it is sad note.
It's a fairly grim ending, the way Empire ended.
But Luke's safe. Everyone else is safe. They know where Han's being taken. The biggest thing is Luke learning the truth. That's it. But with less, I'd say the heroes are in a better position at the end of Empire than they are at the end of The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
But with Last Jedi, they're way more cheery than they are in Empire.
Yeah. And people, I've honestly seen I've seen Star Wars fans with a straight face try to say the movie would have been better if it had ended with Luke not becoming one with the Force. And it's like, well, no, if you had changed it to where Luke actually is still alive, it wouldn't have made much of a difference because the story would have still been a jumbled mess.
It comes
Rey,
at
the
the
main
end.
character we're supposed to be following, would still be largely uninteresting. The whole plotline about Kylo Ren trying to sway her over to the dark side, which is that's a that's a good idea. That's another really good idea that they could have built on, but they were too busy. They were too busy trying to take a stab at weapon smugglers and the rich, and there are no good guys or bad guys. It's like, wow, way to completely undercut everything about the original trilogy.
Way to be thought provoking, writers of the
Yeah,
film.
how fucking original in 2017 when about 9 quintillion movies have already done that. Fucking
I
that
don't
was
even think it's true.
that was why the original movie was so well received in '77 because you had year you for most of the '70s there were so many movies where you didn't quite know there were no clear cut good guys or bad guys. There were a lot of anti heroes that popped up in the '70s. There was no clear good or bad. And then you had the original Star Wars came out, which people take that whole original trilogy way too seriously, completely absent minded of the fact that Lucas made Star Wars as a love letter to Flash Gordon. You knew who your good guys were, you knew who your bad guys were. It was the perfect opposite of what everybody had seen in movies for years throughout the 1970s.
I think in this film, it's as clear as the original film who the good guys and bad guys are, which makes it even less sensical to do what they tried to do. Oh, maybe they're both sides are the same after all. It's like, no, you can't put that in this film. It's no more appropriate here than it was in the original trilogy. I don't even think it makes sense in the context of the film. They buy from the same place. They don't have any of the same ships.
Fucking right. That's a plot hole about the size of Alpha Centauri. Really, we have weapon smugglers that are selling armaments to the First Order and the Resistance. These guys made their riches selling to both the Empire and the Rebellion. Are you shitting me? It was like Ryan Johnson was trying to have his cake and eat it too.
What? This is a side comment because it's not that plot important. What do you think of the Holdo maneuver?
You mean where she jumps into light speed and crashes through Snoke's ship?
Yeah,
I think
that.
what a shocker. They put a woman in charge of navigating the ship, and the first thing she does is fucking crash it.
Yeah, I, it's a visually appealing scene. It's impressive until you think about it for a second, as a million other people pointed out. Why didn't we see this before? what like in all of Star Wars, why bother with the attack on the Death Star? Just jury rig a ship with laden with explosives to fly into light speed into it. Why why don't we have the equivalent of fire ships? And the next film, there's a throwaway line explaining it. Oh, it's 1 in a million, the Holdo maneuver. So what Holdo was trying to do clearly was get her ass to safety, but there's a 1 in a million chance that she just collide with the first order fleet. That's what happened instead.
Which makes her look even worse.
Yeah,
because if you're first watching the movie, it almost looks like she just it looks like a selfless sacrifice. But then if you think along those lines, it's like Holdo was just being a rotten coward.
Yeah. So there's an inconsistency there.
Yeah. From what I understand, one of about 9,000 consistencies between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, which, like I was telling you before we fired this up, really shows that they should have had a creative director at Lucasfilm to have a clear roadmap and guide the directors along. Okay, this is what we're going to do. This is what the. I'm not a fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but Kevin Feige at least has kept that series on a consistent narrative line. Lucasfilm really needed somebody like Kevin Feige to just keep the story going and make sure all the directors were on the same page.
Yeah, he's probably at least the prequels had one vision guiding them. Say what you will about them.
Yeah.
The sequels
Lucas at least had a consistent vision.
The sequels, they're all over the place. What else? There's the music, fine. The acting, fine. Visuals, as you said, great.
Yeah, Rian Johnson does have a good visual eye. He and the framing and the visuals are up to par with what you would get from a Star Wars movie. It's just the writing is just shit.
The plotting, the characterization.
They needed a Kevin Feige, and they needed a script doctor, and they preferably needed a director who wasn't driven by his own ego. Because I don't think Rian Johnson's a shitty director. I just think in this case he got way too big for his britches.
He didn't know if he'd be signed on again, so he's like, screw it, I'll do everything at once. And that's what he did. And nothing when you try to do everything, nothing will work.
Yeah, it's a movie that's trying so hard to do everything that it ends up being nothing. And from what I understand, Rise of Skywalker turned out the same way.
Well, what's your final conclusion?
My final conclusion is I would not recommend. I wouldn't recommend this movie to Star Wars fans. I wouldn't recommend this movie to people who like movies in general. Even if you're unfamiliar with Star Wars, the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy will have you covered there. Rian Johnson has better movies than this. Seek out, if you're curious about Brick Looper and Knives Out, seek them out because they are good movies. Just pretend that this one is a distant memory.
And that's the tragedy. It could have been a very good movie.
Yeah.
And they had it in their hands and they dropped it.
Yeah, hard. Do you have anything else to add?
No, I think we covered everything. I just want to say that it was depressing talking about how one of the most famous and iconic heroes in cinematic history, arguably in the history of all of fiction, got such a shitty farewell. So rest in peace, Admiral Akbar.
Yes. So that is going to do it for this edition of Kris Vents. We are not going to do a venting next week because I'm going out of town for Independence Day weekend. But when we come back, we will be talking about The Rise of Skywalker. So we'll see you in a couple of weeks, I guess.